okay, well, the summer's over, it's raining, it's cold. And, no, it's not actually cold. I'm lying. So I was going to replace the bench material, which I've discovered these yoga mats, they're not expensive really, but they don't last very long, especially if you do woodwork on them, which I have been doing. So I was going to replace it, ready for this job. But what I realized is this job is going to involve quite a bit of sanding. And kind of woodworking. So I think I will get this job done and then I will ditch that and put a new one, clean one on. Meanwhile, I'll use the blue cozy blanket. So what have we got here? We've got a Hohner Professional G3T. If you kind of don't focus the camera on it exactly, you might miss it because it's mighty small. It's a wedge of a thing. I've had a few of these through before, actually quite a lot of them for some major changes, and that sort of will feature into the conversation about this one. So this one is in for a lot of change, maybe not as much as some previous ones, but similar in a way. So this one is Lawrence's, and Lawrence is down in Cornwall and brought this across, and I'll do the work and send it back up to him in South London. But it's Hohner G3T, it's got the Steinberger bridge system, it's got EMG design pickups, it's got no three-way switch, so it's got literally on-off switches for each of the pickups. We've got a push-pull for the bridge coil splitting, and we've got a volume, and we've got a tone, and a tremolo Steinberger system. In the electronics, in the very small space that we've got, we do have nothing exceptional except a little box in place of the tone capacitors, which may, in a sense, actually contain some capacitors, but it's a little sort of high-tech box in there that sort of does the job of the capacitors and does some tone shaping, which I can't explain or describe to you in any particular detail. So this is a guitar that Lawrence has had since he was young, and it's very special to him for that reason. And over the years, he's got a sort of love-hate relationship with it, in so far as it's a great guitar. He loves the sound of it, loves having it around, the portability, the fact that you can just put it on the back shelf of the car, or hang it up and grab it and noodle with it. But he's come to a point where he just doesn't want to live with this thing anymore. So first of all, he doesn't play with tremolo, and of course the Steinberger bridge system is designed to be either a tremolo, as you can see, or if you don't want to use it, there is a small, I have to get a better picture of this because it's worth looking at, a small locking device, a safety catch, which you can, when it's down, it works as a tremolo, and when the catch is locked in place, I guess, it stops it from moving. And then there's a spring adjuster knob there. So he wants that gone. He wants it hard-tailed. Now I know a lot of fans of Hohners and Steinbergers and so on will be horrified at that because hardtail. First of all, there aren't a lot of choices for good quality hard-tailed headless bridge systems, but he wants it gone, and I showed him a couple of my guitars that I've made with the cheap Chinese stuff. Now there's a love-hate, well, no, actually there's a snob relationship to those things in many forums. They're cheap, they're made in China, you get them on AliExpress, and they are made, as people sort of snottily point out, they are of course made of pot metal. Now you would not expect them to be anything else if they were made in those Chinese factories. But the fact is, if you understand how they work and you know their limitations and you treat them with a kind of a bit of care at the beginning, they actually deliver an incredible tuning stability and relative ease of use compared to this over a long period of time for a paltry amount of money. So if you think that this, if you try to buy one of these new, you're probably looking at 150 to 200 pounds for a J Trem system or J Custom system or a Steinberger system. Probably hard to get these, but the J custom version is, I bought one before and it's not cheap at all. So these are expensive. By comparison, the Chinese headless, excuse me, I'm going to blow my nose, the Chinese headless bridge that I'm talking about costs about, actually at the moment, about 30 quid. And I think I've just ordered one for 30 quid and about 5 quid postage from China, and it's on its way. So it's a a fraction of the price, and actually that's not the primary reason. If this was a better unit, I would suggest to Lawrence that he retained it. But when I heard about what doesn't work for Lawrence on this, then there's even more reason to go for the cheaper system, and I'll come to that in a minute. But what is wrong with these? Because when I first saw these G3 or G2s and G3s, a part of me said this is the most perfect guitar ever designed. Okay, I know you can think of Daryl Stuermer of Genesis standing there, or Mike Rutherford playing the bass version, or Daryl playing the bass version and Mike Rutherford playing the 6-string version on some of the 80s Genesis tours, and lots of bands in the 80s had a version, the bass or the 6-string version of these, or the Steinberger. And they, at the time, they were sort of height of modernism, and they just seemed like they were the answer to everything. And on paper, it looks absolutely great. I mean, okay, you lose the sexy, familiar, traditional shapes of a guitar, and that puts a huge chunk of the market off. It's partly why I haven't really got them here, but it's partly why, when I made my own small guitars, travel guitars, and the headless ones, which that isn't, it's why I made a body to them that, while it was small, it had a sort of organic feel and a touch to it, and a belly carves, a sort of belly pot, had contours and shape. And so this is a plank of, well, several planks of wood looking like something very straight. But people like them because what they discovered was, with the headless system, if you had it all right, you just about got fantastic tuning stability. It was inherent in the headless system. But there are problems with this, and the first problems, I suppose, I can tell you about from Lawrence's point of view. So the first one is he doesn't use a tremolo, and this unit here, he likes to play it with this on his thigh, so sitting down. Now my guitars have just a cutaway there that you can place, and there's nothing in the way. These things don't get in the way. It's a different design. But when you have it like this, if you put this in your thigh to sit down and play, then your leg is going to detune these, and that's the first pain in the even if they stayed in tune and they didn't move, which they actually, not only do they move in tuning, they actually move up and down. There's a bit of play in these things, and I don't know exactly why, but again, you click those and it will change the tuning slightly. And you've got this stuff sticking in your leg, so none of that's pleasant to feel. So he doesn't like it for that. He's got tuning instability because of the fact that every time he touches it when he's playing, the lock either comes undone if you sort of jiggle it around a bit. Eventually the lock comes undone. That's no good. And these little things are movable, and they're obviously movable this way as well. The plus about this system is that you can actually grip these and tune them, and unfortunately the same can't be said very easily of the cheap Chinese version. However, that's why I'm not too unhappy with this system, but it's particular to Lawrence that he doesn't like it. The limitations of this bridge are quite astonishing, really. Obviously every guitar, headless guitar bridge that has the tuner sticking out the back demands a kind of rebate in the guitar, whether it's a complete cut like this one, or whether it's a dropped section of a bigger, a cut down like a cavity or a pool, so that you can get a grip. Because if there's no gap there, you literally can't get hold of these. So the end grippy tuner thing dictates the shape of the guitar, which is okay. It's obviously Hohner have designed around this, as Steinberger did. And then what you've got for all your money and so-called engineering you've got a system here which is really actually quite naff. So you've got a fulcrum in these blocks. Each block is a saddle. They sit flat on the metal. What is good about this, if you like, is the little tray that the ball sits in. It's nifty, right? As you can see me winding this out. Look, there's the nifty little ball sits in there. And as we tune it, it tucks away and goes into tuning. Now that's nice engineering. There you go. But these things here are free moving, and they're only held in place by a tiny little grub screw there on the side. Can you see it? And it only holds them in place. You only lock them by squeezing them from one side. So you push with your grub screw here and it crams them together, or shoves them up against this wall actually, and holds them hopefully in place. Well, I have a feeling that that's not happening there because that one looks too far forward. But so it's a really crude system. And so if you want to set the intonation on one of these, you have to trial and error, get this to the right place by slacking the string off, testing it, finding out if it's flat or sharp, slacking the string off, moving it a bit manually each way by undoing this thing at the side, pushing this forward. All the rest will move at the same time because it's hard to move one without the others. They tend to all move. You get this one where you think it's going to be. As soon as you've got one in the right place, then you have to hold that one there and undo this again so they're all slack, and physically move them all together when they can all move. It's an absolute, it's prehistoric actually. And you finally get it, and you hopefully lock it all in place, and then you're done. That really is, it's poor. Now I have to say that it isn't massively better on the other thing, but at least you can lock down on the cheaper one. You actually can lock down the individual saddles so they don't all move around together. So actually it is better, despite the fact that the metal and the machine bolts that it uses are a little bit confidence uninspiring because they're flimsy. But really only have to be careful with them while you set them up on the other. I'm afraid I haven't got it here to compare. I don't keep a spare one knocking about. But that's a negative for this. So you're paying a lot of money for a system that sits at the back end, has to stick out. Granted, has grabbable tuners that I would prefer to have on the other one if I could grab them as easily, but I can't. Now you probably noticed that with this sexy bit of machining down here, what Hohner decided to do to begin with was to give you this arrangement, right? So there's a headpiece which is designed to fit this guitar beautifully and so on. But you'll notice that it relies on balls at this end as well. So this guitar condemns you to double ball-ended strings, which is a lifetime of paying through the nose. I'm just digging for an overfilled drawer here. A lifetime of overpriced strings because of this decision. Now, what is the other possibility you could have here? Well, if you like, I will show you, because I had one made for me. I think it was even for this guitar exactly, and I've got this spare one here. Look at that beauty. And notice what's different? It's got locking doofers on top. So the first thing, if you carried on using this Hohner, you'd want to get this kind of replacement headpiece, because it would free you. This piece alone is good looking, well built, very nicely made, but it would free you from needing those over expensive limited, you can't get them from limited number of places you can get them. This thing would free you from that. You can use ordinary strings, ball end down at the business end of the bridge. This thing works with the cut end of the strings. Now, in a way, it's good if you can use the ball end on this type of thing, because it takes all the force, all the weight. I prefer to be able to use a ball end, but that would be back to having, with this guitar, having two ball ends, or should I say with this bridge, having two ball ends. However, the replacement that I'm suggesting that we're using, or that actually Lawrence wants to use, doesn't require the ball end at this end. So what you get is you do away with the need for double ball end, because the cut string is wound onto a little drum, which sounds very primitive, but it actually works really well. Now that means that you can live with this, and from there onwards, this headpiece here will do the business of taking the weight of the strings, while down at the other end, that cheap Chinese bridge will wind on the cut string, and we're happy. So again, either if you were keeping this bridge, this would be a requirement to free you up from using those stupid double ball end. However, because we're changing this, it frees us up to actually use this. So we retain this, we replace the bridge part. Now that is going to require filling in the cavities for here. So we'll take this off, take all those bits off. We'll try to maybe get a laser printed professionally cut template to fill this. I want to be able to get an absolutely snug fit in there. It's very hard to do it by hand, but it's also difficult if you don't have access to kind of precision laser printing to cut out a shape. I'm going to look into how I could get an absolutely airtight fitting. What I really want is a template with both an inside piece and an outside piece. That would be ideal. Anyhow, I'll look into that. But we're going to fill these blocks, so we're going to take out the whole bridge, this big wadge of spring under here. We're going to take out the stuff here. We'll be left with a big sort of funny shaped cavity which we'll fill with blocks. And the trick will then be to bring it up flush with the rest of the body, and as long as, or stop it at the exact height that will work with the replacement Chinese bridge. Now looking at this, I'm going to do some measurements tonight and drawings to make sure that what I've got it's all going to work. Meaning I would like to bring the new filler blocks flush with this top here, rather than have to sink the new bridge a little bit down. And we do whatever's necessary, but it'd be nice if it came up flush with the rest. This is going to be all sanded back to wood. That's another big thing. So I'm going to take all back to wood. We're going to replace this bridge. This is knackered, this pot, so we're either going to replace it or clean it. It's a bit of a complex system in there, or it's a very packed wiring schema. So I've got to take all of that out, remove all of these, keep them all so I know that they'll all go back together. We're going to take everything off it, strip it right down, sand it to natural, then we're going to true oil it for colour and possibly stain, depending on what the underlying wood looks like. It's always going to be a surprise. It's about 5 pieces, 3 for the neck and 2 for the outside. So it'll be different. It won't be pretty in terms of grain, but we'll turn it into a thing that looks a certain way. And then it'll be possibly stained, true oiled, and then satin nitroed. But before all of that, I will refret it as well. So this is going to be a guitar that lasts Lawrence for the rest of his life. It's a first guitar. It has special sentimental value, and therefore, before anyone goes, well, that really doesn't make financial sense, spending all that money on such a thing. Well, of course it doesn't. So we're, but it's not. That doesn't apply here. What applies is, a sentimental thing. So the other thing that is inherent in these guitars, and I would modify this myself, and in fact on all of my headless guitars I do not use the 0 fret. And the reason is this, I don't know if you'll be able to hear, I'm going to bend the strings from side to side, but I'm going to put this up by my mic. Ready? Hear that? Sorry, I don't want it to play. That little creaking, clicking? That's the strings. That's the strings having notched the 0 fret. And the bad news is that it notches the 0 fret, not so much on the thick strings, because obviously they're bigger and they won't cut in the same way, but particularly on these little fine strings. You may, let's zoom in, you can actually see it. It notches them in such a way that when you bend your strings, let's try and get the light right because it's not quite, oh yeah, hold on. It notches them in a way that you just cannot avoid. I'll keep it still any second there. The light isn't very good, but actually there is, right there is notching, and there is some there, you can probably see. Now that makes a little squeaky, creaky noise. Hear that? So that happens with almost every 0 fret in the world, and it just means that the force of the strings 24/7 sitting against the 0 fret does that. You don't even have to be playing it, unfortunately. So all we can do is we can fit a stainless steel fret there, biggest we can find, and then a slightly smaller gauge of nickel steel for the rest of it. Now the difficulty can be finding a stainless steel that's bigger than these jumbos, because these are usually pretty tall jumbos to be starting with. Anyway, so I'm going to refret that, and we're going to put a stainless 0 fret, and we'll find a big one that will do the job for that. So lots of stuff, everything off, including the frets, refret, put the new bridge on, do a what I call a geometric setup to make sure the frets are good and the basic angles and distances, the bridge is in the perfect position, and so on and so forth. Get it all right, and then, sorry, we'll strip it first. We'll strip it down, we'll fill the blocks, we'll then refret it, we'll then get it all geometrically right with the new bridge, the new 0 fret and the new frets, and then once that's done, we'll take the strings off again, and we'll go back to refinishing, which will take a couple of weeks, and then once it's refinished and ready, we'll refit the hardware, wire up everything, and do the final setup tweaks. So it's going to be quite a lot of work involved, but when all said and done, it's going to last another 30 years. What I'll hope to do is I'll hope to make a couple of replacement 0 frets as well, so that at a later date, if and when this also starts notching, then Lawrence can send it down, and I can swap the 0 fret over. The 0 frets, as I say, are typically always bigger. Technically, they don't need to be. You can probably see that it's a slightly bigger gauge. Now, the reason it is bigger is because although it sets higher action here than it's technically necessary, that action could be half that and be good to play. The reason they go big on this is because they know it's going to notch, and they know it's going to get dressed down by somebody, so it's going to lose its height fairly quickly over the first few years, and then when it's finally at the height of this, it will still play, and eventually it'll notch, and you can't dress it any further. So maybe you get, I guess you might get two dressings out of this before it's exactly the same height as this, and after that you wouldn't want to dress it any lower, because you'd be playing at sub capo first fret actions, which you wouldn't want to do. Anyway, after all of that, that's what we're going to do, and I just wanted to really introduce this today, because I'm not going to do any major work. What I need to do is I need to gauge I need to assess the fret height, not height so much, width. When I examined it, the frets are quite worn. It's not surprising, because it's been a much loved guitar over the years, but you can see that they've been heavily leveled by somebody, I think. I mean, that's not play wear. You don't play that hard to the outside of the thing. So you can see that you see these sort of delta-shaped fret ends. It's where they've got a lot of buzz, and they've leveled them out, trying to eradicate the buzz. Kind of, that's what happens, but it's quite expensive. Hopefully, well, not hopefully, I would be disappointed if I had it playing at the action I wanted, but it took that much removal of material. So I'm kind of pleased to remove the frets in many ways, because we can hopefully improve on that by some considerable distance. So the important thing to do with this guitar is to, let's zoom as far out as is logical, is to gauge the measure as much as we can the string gauge, the fret gauge, and it's actually quite hard to do. These things they're not as accurate as we think. So I'm going to go with we're looking for crown width. I think this is 275. So it's not the hugest jumbo. I would say it's 275, judging by this, 280 max. 275, let's call it 275. So 275. A jumbo is usually kind of 3, running in at 3. So it may be that we get just one step from jumbo. Now, sometimes you'll try and find a bit where it hasn't been worn to gauge the fret height, and it's quite difficult to do. That's coming at about 0.96. Down here on some of the flat bits, I expect it'll look even lower, but you can't really be sure that you're holding the thing perpendicular, which you never can. So I tend to do it at the top end, where I can at least balance this on 2 frets and then hold it there and then drop down into the middle. And it's giving us about 9.9, so that is quite low. So we've got 275. So that's our guiding thing for the same width. And actually, that, much as I like jumbo size frets, super jumbo frets, I think that it would be good to stop one short of super jumbo, because then it gives us the space to use the use the ultra jumbo as the that thing, 0 fret. Now the problem is I also have to find out what the 0 fret is. Actually, when I think about it, I don't need to do anything else with this, so it actually does make sense now to remove these strings and the headpiece. Then I can measure the 0 fret as well, and see how much bigger in this case it is than the other things. Now, I could quite live with this bridge, so I might even make an offer to Lawrence if he really doesn't want it. I guess they are resellable. People look out for them, so I'll have a look at the second-hand price and see what would be a fair offer. Partly the reason I say that is because I've got one of these, which would be the perfect match for the other end of that bridge. So I've got a useful bit that prompts me to do. It's like I've got parts waiting for a headless guitar, but I'm not convinced yet of spending 200 quid on a bridge. But if it's a bit less money because it's second hand, then you never know. Right, so here's our double ball end. You can see that it's just lots of money and lots of little variety in, I guess, in string brands. Now, I'm going to keep my spare bits away. So what we've got here is the bridge. I don't necessarily want to take that apart just yet, so I do want to take this end off. So let's get a screwdriver for the end. This is the end. Now, when things fit on the end, I find it quite iffy to have an end fitting headpiece. Now I've got one that is end fitting as well, and I have to accept that that's that. And the reason I'm not so keen on an end fitting headpiece like these, I'll show you a sort of close up, is because it's a critical part of the whole thing. And for me, to have the entire headstock held in place by these two, well, actually it's not entirely true. They've designed it with a bit of leaning backwards. You see that? So it holds on with a bit of its own grip, and those two screws, but it is a limited amount of gripping. If I go, sorry, I'm not doing a very good job of zooming out. If I look into my spares department, I also have left over from another project a very expensive component, which is the hip shot bridge, headpiece. And this is a kind of simpler version of headpiece designed to sit flat on a plate or on a block of wood. And because of that, it fixes downwards, which I'm much happier with. I'd rather the strings pull like this and be held on rather than be fitted in the end. It's mainly because when you're fitting in the end, you're going into end grain of wood, which doesn't really survive being screwed into more than once or twice before it gets mushy, and you know, it's got a finite lifespan, whereas going downwards onto the grain as opposed to into the end grain feels to me a much better, stronger method. But this is neat. You could definitely give it that. Now, these are quite long screws too, so they have to be perfectly done. Again with, you can see the notching now on all of this 0 fret. You don't have an awful lot of adjustment room on this end block. It's designed to just, it's been glued on. I think it may well have been. There are no more other screws. I have a feeling may have been glued. No, there we go, off it comes. It's got a little, I'll show you now, it's got a little plastic lifter underneath it, which I'll keep in mind. So there's the end. Sorry, I've got an HEI now, which is driving me nuts. So, look at this. This is really interesting. I've seen this before on these. It's had a different end fitting in the past. So the two lower ones are the ones we're using, and they're nice and strong. But look at these holes from a higher thing. So what was on the end before and why it was that much higher is anybody's guess. So what I'll probably do anyway is fill these extra holes that we don't need. But while we're here, let's take a look at the state of the 0 frets here. 0 fret here. You can see that a lot of notching all the way across. You can see you actually can see quite well the way the string, whatever that thing is, you know what I mean, windings are actually just ground into. Look at that, it's kind of cut the 0 fret, and there's a really clear version of it. That's amazing. So that's just from sitting there and a little bit of playing side to side. Wow. It's going to happen now in a little while. Perhaps not now, but I'll be able to test by cutting destructive, be able to test whether that thing is stainless steel or not. I don't think any spec will tell me. Anyhow, so what we're now starting to get is the parts of this guitar that need to be definitely kept together, which I'll bring out a series of little baggies for. I think also I need to take off this spongy, there's a little bit of some sort of crappy rubber. Let's just try and ease it off with a bit of help. Come on. No, it's been glued on and it's sort of not coming off very well. Sort of peeling off. The glue is definitely not wanting to let go. I'm sort of have to cut it a little bit just to get it freed up. Well, there's a part of it, we don't get all of it in one go, I'm afraid. And then the other end cut through. So it's there's a soft plastic rubbery stuff, but it lifts at the front end, so we'll just bear that in mind for when we come and refit. So we are going to pull all of this stuff out, and we are going to destroy this 0 fret in the measuring or in the testing process. But let's just see first of all what we've got in the 0 fret for its width. Here we got the close to the 3mm or 290, 295. So we can go for the widest. It's actually quite a bit wider than this, but this is showing up as, that's kind of lying to me now, 262 it's showing. I told you this isn't trustworthy. We're talking about such tiny amounts. Let's see, 265, I had 275. This is now coming in at 295. Okay, so 265, let's call it 295. 265, and then that's the regular one, and then the 0 is 295, as close to 3 as you can get. 295. What we don't really know too well about is the height of it, but if we keep it as perpendicular as possible. So it's coming at 122, 116. I'm going to take a sort of an average of this, 120, 114. See, if you turn it, lean it one way, it's 144, and if you tip it that way, it's 91. So it's very, very difficult to get it to be flat. I mean, we could try. We could try this measurement. 160 minus 49. 160 minus 46. 160 minus 46. 110. What do we bring 14? 120. I think 160, 149. I think it's between 110 and 120, but that isn't very high at all. Let's have a look at a piece of not zero fret, a piece of fret wire that I've taken the tang off, and I know what, actually know what height this is. It's actually, it's 140 something, but I've got a little bit higher here, and that would come in, that's lower than that. So it is lower. Okay, we don't care about the thickness, what we care about the height for setting the action. So I would say that this is, I would say this is 120. Now, we could do the obvious thing, which we're going to have to do, and we could remove it. Let's see how hard it clings onto life. Feels quite willing to come out. So get a better handle at it. So we are getting about, what did I say, 295 for the width. Let's go back to 0, 295. I think 290 is about right, so let's go 290. 290 there. And actually, while we're at it now, let's take one of these. Very nifty, very fine little fret pullers, these. So this will give me a better view of the width. No pull out, tear out or anything, that's good. Okay, so we've got, oh, it's not far off. I said 265. It's come up about, I think 270 we'll call it. To go back to 270, 265, 270, 2.7, and the 0, again the width isn't important, it's the height. So what we're looking for is the height, and that's coming in at, it's hard to do because without taking the tang off you can't measure the height of the tang, so we can take a bit of tang off since we aren't going to use this, and this will also help tell me whether it's a stainless steel or a regular. Nope, that is a very nickel steel. Okay. So when you take the tang off, obviously, well, usually is a bit of rough material under there, so it helps to just one second, it helps to just thingy it. The word I'm looking for. Come on, where's the block? Is this it? No. Yes. It helps to just file it back a little bit so that it's you can stand up there. That's the nice thing about it. So I'm just going to file this back flush so that I can make a more accurate measurement of the height. So we won't reuse this fret, so it doesn't matter. But it's told me what I need to know, and that is they used what we call nickel steel or copper nickel, the usual stuff, soft fret wire. Okay, so here we go. So that's 140. I think this is going to be the jumbo height. Coming in at one, it varies depending on how hard you bite it, but it's coming in at about between 135 and 140, some places 154, 140. I would say 1.4 height. So the 0 fret is 1.4. 1.4. Now I know that that's the sort of height of the typical jumbo fret, which is, we can have a look here. Look at this one. Actually, like I said, it's a bit over because it's got some of this leftover tang. The foot of the tang. I use this piece of fret wire to make a custom file, which is really good for sanding fret slots. Okay, so that's pretty close to what it is, and we're looking at the same. So that is that 0 fret will be a piece of jumbo FW58118 stainless steel, which I happen to have. This I probably don't have. I'm going to have to order this in a smaller size. So we know what we now know what the width is. Let's now snip off the tang of this bit, and we'll check the crown height. So nice and soft. Actually difficult to hit the crown, hit the tang and get it off. Again, I don't have to worry about slightly wrecking this because it ain't going to be reused. We're just making measurements from it. So when you cut the tang with one of those tang nippers, it never cuts it absolutely flush. So it's always a good idea to file the kind of stump down a little bit, because if you do, your chances are of your crown sitting flatter, something like that. It's not perfect still, but it's close enough. So the crown height on this is showing up as, now don't forget this is worn, so it's showing up as 110, but it's worn. It's been leveled at this end as well, so that's not a good indicator. We'll go by the width, because I mean we'll be constrained by the width. It'll say you can't go any, if you want 2.7 wide, you have to have tall. So 2.7, and we'll put in brackets here the worn height is currently, brackets, worn height is currently, what did I say, 1.15, 1.15. So the target would be, target for that one is 1.45, target of this one, because the 0 fret doesn't wear downwards in the same way. So the target of a 1.15 is, we really want at least 1.3, possibly even 1.4. So not that far away from the jumbo size, because I think with the jumbo we get 1.47 and 2.9, so that's a 0 fret. We might get 1.3. Anyway, right, so let's put these important bits in their little evidence bags. So that's critical. These we'll put in another bag. I'll take a picture now of my, will I? No, I'll take a video view of my findings. That's the fret wire I've got to go looking for. And we know that, whoops, we know that this one's going to be stainless, and this one is going to be regular. Now we get what we're given in terms of tang width. I expect if we match these closely, then we'll also end up getting the same tang width or slot width. That's the idea. So there's our findings. That helps me. That's fine for me now to search and find the right fret wire. The rest of it after this point now will be stripping it all down, there's no reason not to go from there onwards. That's the next job. I mean, I've got time, I suppose. I could continue to do it now. If we keep this out of the way, that's my headless box of goods. These are the bits. These are the bits we're given. Oh, let's have a look. Well, I mean, we could defret the whole thing. One of the things that happened was when Lawrence brought it in, this thing was buzzing, rattling, and I discovered, wow, I discovered that it was in fact the truss rod adjuster was loose and spinning around and buzzing, and here it is. It comes right off if you carry on, so that's no use. We need it back in there, tightened up, and there was a bit too much relief in the neck as well, so that was kind of useful because I was aware that we could stop the rattling of this truss rod and dial out a little bit of that excessive relief. Now, the first thing to do before we invest time and money, that is not what it looks. That is not twisted. It's just the camera lens. So the things that we want to do before we put any time and money into this is to crank the truss rod to, you can't see it from here, to make it, we need it to bend in a concave fashion. It's very only just about doing it. It's not that meaty. I mean, not that aggressive, I have to say. So I'm just going to now look for, get my bit of room. It's too long, really. Okay. Yeah, we got a little bit of curvature in it, or a little bit of hump in it, but it isn't a massive amount, and that is kind of at the tail end of where I would want to be pushing it to adjust it. Well, there's probably enough in there to just dial out the thingy, and we have to make sure that it's as straight as it can be when we come to do any sanding off and refretting, which I want to do a bit of sanding just to clean up these surfaces. So typically what I want to do, let's defret it because that's the next logical step. I put as much back bow into it now as I'm comfortable doing. I'm going to fire up my soldering iron. I'm going to bring it, if I can find the wires. Boink. I'm going to bring it somewhere. It gets tangled up. Bring it out to about here. Stay there. And I'm going to get a wet cloth or tissues, and I'm going to put some moisture onto the fingerboard so that we can help soften the wood a little bit, and in doing so just help to remove these frets. So it's just a bit of surface water lying there, you can probably see. Now what I'm going to do is just zoom in so you may be able to see what I'm doing. I'm going to use a bit of heat. I'm going to use a bit of, let's hold it in place. I'm going to use that nice pullers, my Hosco fret pullers. So we've got the neck bent backwards as far as it will go in order to hopefully just gently ease off its grip on the fret tangs. And what I'm going to do before I pull them up is I'm just going to go up the entire, hopefully the entire length of the neck, and just make a first nip underneath the tang end, the fret end. I've lost a bit of my sharp edge there. Look at that. That's what happens. They weren't cheap either, these things. So I'm just lifting the end a tiny bit, and it is a matter of just getting the tool in the right place so you don't have to push down too hard. It's nicely just lifting the end, and that will just make the removal process much easier in a minute. and I'll use the heat at that point, and the heat will create a little bit of steam under the, hopefully under the, under the, in the slot. That's the idea, if it can. And just the whole thing will be to ease the removal of the frets a little bit. There's a tiny little bit of tear out there. It's hardly anything, but there's another bit trying to come out there. So it's always a difficult thing to fret right up at this part of a set neck. Very difficult, because you can't get up there. Now that one's trying to pull up some material. It does it. If it does, it does. It's almost impossible for that not to happen at some point. So as we come back down here, I can't see what you can see. Oh yes, now you can see it. Sorry about that. Terrible view. My camera work as always. So now I'm going to heat up, rest the soldering iron on the fret end, as well as sort of keeping it safe within the grippers, pullers, sort of safety of the pullers, I should say. So it's heating up the fret somewhat, and we are nibbling our way along. And that's a pretty neat and nice removal. Again, sort of grip, support the fret, support the soldering iron end, and then it should have got quite a bit of heat into the fret by then, and then sort of just move along with the soldering iron in between the jaws of the doofer, and off we go. And so that is that, and then we just keep nipping along. So it's funny that this will look like quite a sorry lump of nothing before it gets better, because we're dismantling it completely and utterly. Only leaving the basic wooden shell at the end of it. Okay. I think I'll probably camera's out of shot a minute. I will move you. It's interesting that when I do the editing on these videos, well, it's not editing so much as compiling, I try to get the levels of the audio as high as it will go without running into lots of red clipping. But even when I go as high as I think I can go, it never comes out to be a particularly loud thing. And this, I don't know, maybe this mic isn't ever anywhere close enough, but it's designed so you can't really get any closer. So that's sort of how it is. I guess there might be one of these automatic level equalizer things. I used to use one called the levelator. It was pretty good actually at going through a whole entire sound file and hoiking up everything, all the sound to a single level. Of course, it was a bit much if you listen to something for too long, but in small amounts, it was a pretty good levelator, I suppose you could call it, which is what it was called. But I think I don't know if they still make it anymore, and I haven't got the exact same thing on the. I'm not sure if Final Cut Pro has such a thing in it. It probably does. Well, I know Final Cut Pro does have in it, which is quite neat. It has some sort of ability to line up two, or put together two clips of video which share not the same soundtrack, but which have two different soundtracks of the same event, and then it can find the sync points in them. I've tried to do it automatically, and actually I didn't get very good results, so I've ended up always now just do it the manual way. And it's interesting doing it manually, and I sort of sync it up visually and go from there. And when I've got it perfectly synced, and the audio is absolutely perfectly synced, within 30 minutes it will be drifting slightly off again. I have to cut the soundtrack and just hoik the video, or cut the video and soundtrack and drag one of the sources just a fraction of a frame in one direction to re-sync them perfectly, and it's about every 30 minutes I have to do that. It's not that onerous a task, but it's surprising how quickly these two digital sources run out of time with each other. And I guess, you know, they are two different manufacturers. One's Sony, one's iPhone, and they'd have to have some sort of basic internal real-time clock for it not to get out of sync. And you know, you're hoping that the idea is you're hoping that they play back in exactly the same relation to time as they recorded, but actually that's a surprisingly difficult thing to achieve, and they clearly don't achieve it. Two different technologies don't achieve it together, so hence the adjustment is required every half an hour of film, but actually I've got used to doing it and it's not very unpleasant. And then I tend to, I ditch the Sony camera's audio and use the iPhone's audio, which is obviously coming mostly from this head-mounted mic. But it's not actually as good as the audio from the iPhone itself, but that's less consistent. The reason I use this little mic is so that whatever I'm doing, the talking volume is always the same, whereas you can't assure that if I move away from if the iPhone's recording the audio on its own mics, and I'm not using this head-mounted thing, then I can move away down to the end of the bench and everything goes quieter, whereas if the mic that's providing the sound source for the video stays close to my mouth as it is, then it will always be at a standard level. But the cost or the price paid for that exchange is that unfortunately, the head-mounted mic audio is by no means as dynamic and sparkly or nuanced as the iPhone built-in mics. They have a very superb quality inbuilt mic sound. But this head-mounted mic only cost me, I got it a bit of a discount, but it cost me about £100 10 years ago nearly, or something like that. And it's kind of worked ever since, really. So it's probably well overdue to be retired and thrown in the bin. I think it's designed as a kind of stage mic, you know, for either for giving talks or even for singing, I think. Okay, so now you can see we have defretted the beastie. Let's give you a quick look at that. Ooh, and we will sand the whole of that a little bit, and I'll tidy up this too, so fill those holes so we get a good and clean surface both at the end for the headpiece, but also along here for the frets to seat on. And that's the key to getting a good refret, is preparation of the surface as well as the new frets. So you saw that you know, if we use a tang nipper, then we need to clean underneath the cut bit of the crown where the tang's gone in order for it to sit properly in place. So there's a lot of stuff to do and take care of. So here's our two test frets that I used, sacrificial frets, and I'll just keep those with the other ones for fun. Now the thing I want to be mostly careful of in the removing of things is going to be the electrics. I want to make sure that nothing comes undone. I do, as it happens, have a wiring diagram of this guitar, which thankfully could save the day if all goes completely wrong. There's nothing too complicated about it, other than it's that funny little box with all the tone goings on. Now, while I've just got this here, I'm going to slack off now to take out the back bow, because it's just a sort of, what's the word, hygiene thing to do, because if I do anything now with this neck, fretting or sanding or re-radiusing or whatever I might need to do, what I need to be sure that this thing is flat before I start working on it. Now, as it currently happens, it's got a bit of grime around the fret slots, as you can expect. So what I'm just looking for is, notwithstanding the grime, I'm looking for, that's a little bowed still, so we still need a bit of tension on there to bow it out, back it out. That's probably about right. Now there are ways to add a bit of push to your truss rod if it really isn't. That's good. If it's not doing the thing, or it's not pushing hard enough, you can sometimes add a little washer inside of that adjuster thing that you saw earlier. That is a possible thing to do, and in the past, if I'd needed it, it gives it a bit of extra push. Not sure if it's when I think about it too hard, it doesn't seem to make sense, but it seems to have worked in the past. Okay, so here we have the this unit here. Now, what I can't remember is the whole disassembly of this, funnily enough. What I do know is that we can take off the little scrub screw at the side, and you'll see that, look, all of those come apart. They come loose, and then they come apart, like so. Now, we're not going to reuse them just now, so they don't need to do anything. They can just go into a safekeeping bag. So we have the unit that sits in down here. Now, I can't remember exactly how this comes off. Can you believe it? It's fine. No strings on. That's shut down and grab my hands, of course. Let's take off this adjuster back here. So it's obviously pulled in on that spring. So I'm going to undo that spring. Don't know how well you can see that, but out it comes. And there's the springing unit. So there's quite a bit of gubbins in here that makes this work. You've got your tremolo spring, you've got your basic guide path for the bridge mechanism. It's a clever little thing, works really well. Wow, that's a bit worn. What is that then? That's the locking thing, I believe. Yeah, so that clips on there and grabs hold of. Sorry, that won't help at all. That little hook is designed to grab onto this little ledge here and keep it. There's a bit of grindy wear on there, not surprising. So we take this all out. We get that out. That goes, as we see from here, that will go at the outside edge if we come to reuse it. And then we'll take out this pieces here, and we might as well screw that in. So this whole piece here should come out with these nice big screws. So what I wanted to be able to do was to measure this, take this home and use the body now to measure this, to create a template if possible of the things to fill the hole, and then from that to work out the relative heights and make sure everything will work. So I'll leave the pickups in for now so I can use them to gauge the height. I've got a ruler at home that I can use. Probably would have benefited from leaving the 0 fret in, actually, thinking about that. There you go, here comes all of this gubbins there, and then under that we've got a ground wire that grounds the bridge. It goes from the metal underside of the bridge into the cavity, and we have to set up another one of those to do the same. So I'm just going to get my 0 fret a minute, figure out which end was which. Right, that's that end. I'm going to tap this back in, believe it or not. Yes. Is it seated? Well, yes, that's good. That will be good for leaning our ruler on. That's probably a good idea. Okay, so we've got a few little bits of chip out, very small number of bits of chip out. What I'm going to do while I'm at it as well, let's have a quick check, cross check of the neck fingerboard radius. If it's a compound radius, I don't want to mess with that at all. So we'll see. What do we think it is? Somebody will know. Well, it's not that. It's flatter than that. Possibly a no, maybe. No. Wow. It's close to 20 inches. No, it's about 18 maybe. Of course, I don't have anything of this nature. So that's cool. What I'm going to avoid doing is doing anything with a, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to do anything with a radius block in the vicinity of that. So a radius block would be most unhelpful because it would impose the radius onto it that is not what I want. So I'm just, for the time being, I'm just going to, before I go, take it home and use it for drawing a plan. I'm just going to take off the sort of scratchy burrs, and because I'm doing it by hand, it will, respect the original radius of the thing. I could probably do a bit more research. I didn't think of looking out for the radius, but it's probably 18 to 20, something like that. It's quite flat. So, but anyway, for now it's just a matter of cleaning up so I can lay a flat edge on it. Okay, that'll do for now. Yeah, very, very small amount of chip out, but by the time we've redone this, it will be immeasurable. Okay, so that's going to go back in its case for now and come home. As you can see, it's starting to become a shell of its former self. We also might as well take off this while we're here, because that is going to come off anyway. This is the little arm. I mean, I could take out all the electrics now, but I don't want to because I want to leave the pickups in. So obviously, to get the whole lot out, I'm going to have to cut or desolder, and I need to know exactly what I'm doing at that point, so I'll sort of concentrate on that at a separate time. Okay, so I've got some of me bits and pieces. Those all belong to there. Those belong to that. There's me frets, and me 0 is on the guitar. Good. So that's all I need for my drawings and calculatings. So first of all, this is slightly curved, isn't it? So that's going to make, not difficult, but I've got to be very careful when I'm measuring. So we have to have a curved block. Well, it doesn't have to be curved. I mean, it shouldn't be curved. This new bridge will want to sit on a flat block, not a curved one. So we're going to have to put in a flat piece, but we can make it proud and then something it back. It's going to be just a bit tricky because this is by default a little bit curved, and we're going to need to run this bit flat. So we'll have to be very, very good. Actually, this flattens out here. They flattened it out themselves, I think, just at the bridge point. Yeah, they have. That's quite good, because of course this has to be flat, but it will probably be routed from a higher platform, not this surface. Things you have to think about. Okay, so I need a few other little containers for the various bits, but in fact I've got a box which I'll put them in, and then we'll be done for today's stuff, and the rest of what I'll do is tonight do some measuring at home. Have I got any big spare? Right, those can come out of there. It's a waste of a nice bag that a piece of bridge could go in. Right. I mean, actually what's quite interesting is to map the cavities in this, because if I'm going to use this again, I'd have to recreate the cavities exactly the right size and so on. Yikes. It's quite a difficultly shaped piece. So let's keep these safely out of the way. Will it close? Will it close? Will it close? Not very well. Okay, you go in there, you go in there. One more bag needed. Nothing big enough. What about this? Yeah, that'll do. A bunch of battery compartments are not going to be used in a hurry. They can be the home of that bit. Alright, so there in this box is all the goodies from the Hohner G3T. Safe. Okay, and then this is going to go back in the box. So that's it for now. Oh, I'll tell you what, we don't need these getting in the way. Let's take these, what do they call them? Strap buttons off. They have two, so that you can stand the guitar up on its tail end, which is a smart thing to do. And then a third goes into the heel here. Okay. Three of those. And one more little bag, please. Ooh. Ooh, 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 I need those at some point. Another bag, small bag. There we are. Okay, that's all of that done. I'm going to call it quits for now. In you go. You can go in the bag. Bag box. Wow, there's nothing to it. It's got no weight at all. So that's me done, and I'm going to see you for the next bit. I've got to keep, because I'll be doing this guitar work in parts on this guitar, I need to be very careful to make sure that I put the camera on, because I managed to miss out the whole of the setup part of the recent Gibson Les Paul Custom, which was such a shame because I did all the fretting bit and then lost the video somehow of the other part, which was pretty interesting. Okie dokie, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you in the next bit. Okay, woo, look, here we are. Obviously I haven't filmed a lot of, well, the True Oil business, but here we have the Hohner ready to refret, and that's what I'm doing today. Frets are there. It's a daylight visit. Ooh! Just as well. I had to use the power pack to start the car, but no surprise there. I know that's the problem. Still, the logic was £50 now better than £200 now, or £300, an unknown amount of pounds. Anyway, so that's what we're doing. We're taking the cheap short-term option of using the power pack. very simple, very quick. And right now, at this point in the month, it's just easier to do that than, or cash flow wise, it's easier to do that than spend an unknown amount on an auto electrician. I mean, I guess an auto electrician is probably very good at looking at an old car like ours and diagnosing the problem, and there's probably lots of logical steps that they would go in order to diagnose the problem. But as far as from where I stand, obviously not being an auto electrician, it looks mighty scary and complicated, so I don't like the look of it. So I'm looking at all of this, and I'm looking for any major tom to ground control, any major chip outs, and there's just one there which I might do. The problem with fixing is the word I'm looking for. Fixing such chip outs is that they sort of can end up sticking up a bit, and you have to sand them back, and sometimes it's better to do it with a radius block. But then if you do it with a radius block, you have, there's some dark sawdust. Yeah, you can, what can you? You can end up in a situation where you've got an unevenness, and you've got to cut it back quite a bit, which we could do without, sand it back quite a bit with a radius block. So we don't want to get into redoing that. So I'm just going to, for the second now, I'm going to cut me a little piece of, I'm not really sure this is a good material to use, but I'm going to use it anyway. Just a little bit of blocking thing there. And so I'm going to tip this over here, and we'll come at it from this side, won't we? Yeah, that's just the thing is there. This has got a kind of grease-proof paper on the back of it, and it's with the sandpaper there. Has a certain thickness to it, which actually kind of seems to work out quite well. So I'm going to do such like there, because pretty much everything after that is okay. What I'm also going to do today is shield these cavities again. They're pretty good, but they've got dusty and stuff. So I'm going to try and, technically we could, that's everything. Yeah, we should probably leave it actually. I'm tempted to do it first, but that's a cop out or a cop in. I don't know, one of the two. So what we want to do is we want to, it doesn't really have a logic either which way. If we go dust first and then glue, it's sometimes no better or worse than doing glue first then dust. This is quite thin stuff. Okay, so there we've got ourselves a thing, probably a bit too wet now, so if we throw some extra sawdust on there, that's most certainly going to give us a complete cover. I don't think I may have the activator tin has just about run out, but let's see if we can help it. Yeah, fiddly. No, I think on my shopping list needs to say, for God's sakes, get some activator, because I don't think there's anything. I mean, there is something left in there, but it ain't no good for us. So we just have to figure out what's going on. I can feel it's a bit crunchy, so most of it will be dry, I expect. And then what we'll try and do is that's about right. So if we look at that in the close-up, wherever it's gone, hello, there you are. Yeah, we've got a fill. It looks ragged and ugly at this point in time, but it's going to improve massively. So I've got a meeting tonight of another parish council style meeting, which is fine. But it just means that's why I'm not planning for an evening session here. Okay, so now what I've got is I need to basically sand this bit down, and there's no set way for doing it. I think a file might be good to begin with. Oh, there you are. Oh, hello. Just because we've got a sort of a direct line, attack on it without standing everywhere else. That's fine. We'll put some sandpaper on it in a minute. But my aim is to get the bulk of the stuff out of the way first. Okay, let's get a little wood block actually. A little wood block and a little bit of just a sandpaper, and we can use a bit more of this. Actually, we can stick it to it. Why don't we? Let's stick a little bit of this on there. Temporary device. Anyway, I hope everyone's well in this messed up, slightly scary, God knows what's happening world we're in. I was saying, but only yesterday on a setup video, that I'm pretty not pessimistic about where things are going, but what I do know from my own, I don't want to say philosophy isn't right, but my own kind of outlook on the world, and that is that I would be things are better when you shouldn't be beeping, you should have no signal. Things are better when I concentrate on being in the moment instead of worrying about the state of the world, and or thinking about how to put the world right. As soon as I get into that sort of I've got to fix the world type of mentality, that's where dissatisfaction and frustration set in. And I know that some people might think, well, that sounds like an excuse for doing nothing, and it isn't, but it is I think it is a business about, or it's a matter of realistically knowing what you can do something about and what you can't. And I think that's an important, I guess, Alcoholics Anonymous and NA, Narcotics Anonymous, and self-help groups have a great saying, which does not belong to them. I can't remember whose it is now, but it's the Serenity Prayer that says, God, who I don't necessarily go for that bit of it, but it just says, "Oh universe, whatever, higher power, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can change, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two." And I think that's a really smart bit of philosophy to kind of bear in mind. I'm going to do a little bit more of, this is not quite up to the level of the board, so I'm going to put a tiny bit more dust on here and a tiny bit more glue. Just get it flush with the surface. Since I've started, I might as well finish. Let's get a zoom in, since we've got nothing stopping us. Nothing is stopping us now. Yeah. Well, there we are. So I went home last night and I played my Indian encore that I saved not saved, upcycled, I should say, which is great. I really like the way it's come out. I tried to, well, I think the best way of describing it is that, you know, if you can plug it in, play it, and find yourself just playing it from the very off. Now this might take a bit longer to set, dry, whatever, because it's not got any of that. I'm going to try and find the last, I know this is terrible, I'm going to try and force the last bit of this stuff to come out. I don't know if it's it could even be the lid nozzle thing. But anyway, yeah, so if you find yourself with a guitar that you just can play without having to worry about any tweaks or adjustments or anything like that, I think that's a good sign. So that's definitely where I feel that was last night. I just had a great hour playing it without any other. Let's see. Now it's this bit's blocked. I thought it might be the nozzle part, but it's nozzle, it's the other bit. So that's normal. It's the damn can. Come on, get a bit of something. Oh, well, look at that. I got the last dregs of it out. All right, I'll just have to live with that. So a bit crunchy. So like I say, we'll do the same thing again. We'll hand shape the higher peaks of this repair. Anyway, yeah, so I played it for a good hour and really liked it. So, and the only mistake, if you like, or adjustment I had to make after finishing yesterday was to, as soon as I'd put it together here, I knew that I'd got, believe it or not, I got the tones rigged up to the wrong pots, which was an easy fix, and I also, the bridge and middle pickup were out of phase with each other, and that was easy enough to fix by changing around the bridge wiring. A very simple sort of way of doing it, which is mercifully easy on a single coil Strat style guitar. Well, easy. It would be easier on a Telecaster actually, where you can get under the control panel without even without having to remove strings, but not such a big deal on a Strat even to do that. So I'm just trying to very gently take this back to a nice flush thing, whilst respecting the basic radius of the thing, and I'm going to sort of go all the way across the fingerboard here for a minute just to make sure everything is in similar shape, and then I will clean it all off again. So I am lined up to re-fret it, and I think I'm going to do it with tapping in the frets. Now you wouldn't be able to tell where that repair is. I'm not even sure where it was myself. Somewhere, maybe there. Yeah, so yeah, I'm going to tap in the thingy because the frets, because I think I could do some of them with the press, but because I can't get all of them, it introduces two different ways of fretting into one single neck, and I never particularly like doing that. I'd rather it was all done one way. So if the neck, being a glued in set neck, if the neck requires that I do it that way, then I'd rather do it that way. The tapping. There's a little cut out there. Oh, look at me. Cut out. A little bit of. I'm using its own self-generated dust I'm going to shake this damn thing as much as I can. Oh, look at that. Shaking, that's where it's all at. It's probably still going to be liquid. Yeah, it is. Blimey. Let's put a bit more of this on there. If we can soak up a bit more. Blow it away. No, that blew everything away. So that thingy accelerator really didn't seem to do anything. So I'm just going to throw some more stuff on here. Soak it up. Jiggle it around. Hopefully blow away some of it. Can you see? Can you see? There we are. Sorry about the camera. So, yeah, it's taking a while to dry. I'm not sure it's really. We shall see. Anyway, so yes, so today's task during the day, light hours, is to fret this and leave it then overnight till tomorrow for the process of tomorrow will be end beveling. Okay, so this is I'm just going to double check, but it's a 14-inch radius, if I recall correctly. So I probably need a bit of, what's that? A bit lighter than that. I've gone across the grain there, which isn't so good. Yeah, I'll just double check the radius, but I'm pretty certain it's 14. So I've got everything materials wise and components wise. I've got everything I need to complete this. All I really have to do next is we'll refret it. We'll bevel the fret ends tomorrow, and then really after that it's going to be a matter of waiting for the right kind of temperature stroke humidity, which isn't going to be around for, I don't think it's going to be good for a week or two. So we'll leave the true oil, which is on here, and which I've sanded back to a sort of very light 1000 grit sanding, but that's now just going to be curing over the next week to 10 days, and just keeping an eye out for a window of opportunity to spray. And it doesn't have to be perfect, and obviously in November in the UK it's not going to be perfect, but as long as it starts at a reasonable level, then I can use some heat in here and a dehumidifier to stand some chance of getting a small environment in here, otherwise known as my spray space, or spare parts storeroom. Be able to get that spraying done, and it's just going to be a matter of spraying clear satin nitro from the high volume low pressure spray system thing. Okay, so here we have the guitar. Let's put a few things out of the way. Now to do this I'm going to use glue, but I'm going to use tight bond glue, so it's good to clean up, or easy to clean up, and for that purpose I've got a ton of little pieces of tissue paper which I will throw onto the floor or somewhere when I've finished using it. Actually, in fact, what I'll probably do is throw it onto this piece of kitchen roll here. It might make more sense. I'll put this out of the way because I'm tempted to do this early, and I'm not going to do it early. It's better to leave it till the finish out here is done. So today we're only concerned in fretting and getting the frets to all sit nicely. So first thing I'm going to need is the 0 fret from the Hohner kit, and the 0 fret, I made a series of them, but I'll get one of the 0 frets from out of here. Stainless steel 0 frets. So let me, oh okay, it's already in the mix. Okay, I've got 2 spares then. Silly me, I thought never mind. I put one already as fret 0 on the board here. So I've got 2 spare 0 frets is what I meant to say. Which will be good because they're there in case Lawrence wants to use them in the future. I have a feeling that, no, in fact I know that stainless steel notches as well, but obviously not as badly or as quickly, but it's not free from. I can't believe it's not a 0 fret. Right, so I need a wet cloth, a damp cloth I should say, and I need something to put it on. So cloth. Here is a nasty damp cloth, which is probably a bit, smells like a wet dog. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to deafen you. Just wetting it in the sink department, wringing it out. Its only purpose is to wipe down the fingerboard and soften any glue. So I think it would be good to have it sitting on something plastique that can stand the water. So I'm going to stick it there for what it's worth. So we need a little lid or container of glue. I think we could probably use this little thing as a better container for doing glue, a flat container. So I get quite a bit of glue in there. I think this old glue now still does what the glue should do, but damn it, but it is quite pretty old now. So slow to come out. Right, there you go. Chop the supply off. So we've got our little container of glue. We've got our catcher rag thing over there. And we've got behind you, we've got a line of the frets. So I'll bring them forward and we'll put you behind it and find a slightly better view, maybe. Okay, if we work off that should be all right. So we'll start at the 0 fret end. Now what I've got is basically I've got one of these desk dogs, bench dogs or whatever they call them, and I'm going to use that as my support block for hitting with my little hammer. And I'm going to use a little piece of, what's this, maple? I'm going to use this as my tapping thing. It's actually a bit tall and ungainly, so I'm just going to snick off a bit of it. Hey man, stay still. Oh, I know what I've got. If you need to make a radius in a hurry, sometimes you can cheat with an old disused neck, unused scrap neck. So if I want to take a bit of this section and I want it to be a bit radiused, it's not perfect. I wouldn't want to do this for a precision tool, but what I want here is I just want a bit of a radius on this for tapping. It's a bit crude. I have to say, I'm wandering off a lot there. It's quite difficult to keep it upright. It's probably a better device or a guide I could make for this, but it's a good idea in principle. I'm happy with that for tapping in frets. It's just a little bit of a curve. It doesn't even have to be exact. Could probably do just as well by putting one of the big drums on that thing. You know what I mean, the Triton pillar sander thing, oscillating thing. Anyway, you know what I mean. Okay, so what have we got? We have got the 0 fret, we've got the glue, we've got the wet cloth, we've got the frets all lined up here. Here we begin with the 0. Now the decision I'm going to make, or I have made, I'm making, is that I can either, and here's my decision, you can either treat this as a bound neck and slightly undercut the frets and then fill the ends in, and that looks kind of nice, but you don't have a tang right to the edge, and there's amazing that little bit of missing tang can it allows the fret end to creep up where you don't want it to. So the alternative then is to go all the way to the edge with metal, and the downside is if over time your neck shrinks, the wood shrinks, then your fret can get sprout. But like I said, on the upside is you get a very clean end and it isn't twisted, and you get a little metal bit of the tang showing. So I think I'm going to aim for that. And the first one, of course, is my 0 fret, which I already know is going to be bigger, taller and wider than the other frets on the neck. So they're all, this one is, the 0 fret is the largest Jessica fret size, the FW 58118, and the rest is the next size. The rest are the next size down from that. So here's the first tapping taste, and see how it likes this springy thing. Now, the truth is, if it's too springy and everything bounces too much, we can bring in, for example, the cork thing. The cork thing. We could look at supporting it in that. Don't forget, we're already on top of a yoga mat, so the whole thing has got, potentially a fair bit of bounce in everything. But I can feel that that's a little bit more solid. So the next thing I do is just wipe off the excess glue, and of course, as I'm doing that, I'm looking at the seating of the fret. Now you can see, of course, it's way too long, but that gives me plenty of room to cut short and then bevel in line. So there's my sort of clean up bit, and then another piece of thing. Now I'm just going to look down the end here, and that's sitting beautifully on there. I've got no concerns about that as a first or a 0 fret. So I'll give you a quick zoom in look from here. There we are, 0 fret. Yes, a bit of glue under there which I can clean up. The way it sits. Ow! Just cricked my neck looking in a funny angle. So that's okay. Let's change the angle a little bit. There we are, the first few. We'll go with the first few from there. Okay, and if you're sort of thinking, is it where I want it, you can always give it another whack. It doesn't hurt. And sometimes if it's not seated, you'll see a bit more glue squirting out, but if it was seated pretty well, then it won't produce any squeeze out anymore. And so what, like I said, what we'll end up with is a beveled fret with with the tang showing, and thankfully with luck the tang will be not twisted. If you cut it too close, funnily enough, you reduce the amount of end bevel time, which sounds like a nice thing to do, but you sometimes get a twist. You introduce a twist too close to it. You don't if you were to Dremel it. It might be worth getting a Dremel disc and just cutting these excess bits off. It's never any good to have a ton to do. And in some ways I no, I don't need to. I was going to say I could have pre-shaped that completely, but it doesn't need it because the end beveling block will work on it. It'll do the job. Okay, so I'm just checking my support systems. Feels nice. And now I'm going to get ready for the next one in line. So this next lot is, I never remember the number, but it's the one size down in the Jescar fret range size. So it's just one from Super Jumbo, which happens to be almost identical to the existing frets on this Hohner. So again, I'm going to overhang these plenty. I've got loads of overhang room, and I'm going to cut that back when the time is right. So it seems like it's going in quite nicely. Interestingly, up to recently, I'd never known what the term repair fret meant. Kept seeing it, and finally, it's one of those things you realise you keep seeing it. I've never bought repair fret wire, so I thought I better actually go and find out what it means. So I did a quick bit of research, and it turns out that repair wire is the same gauge as whatever other kind of wire it is you're looking at, but it has a slightly wider tang. So it's recognizing that, whoops, that's not good, recognizing that you've pulled out some frets from an existing guitar and that the slots may be just slightly looser than when the guitar was being made first time around, and so they help you to overcome that by just increasing the tang width a little bit. So I'm just going to quickly look down here just to reassure myself that this is seating well, and that's really important in this first few frets worth of refretting. I often talk about the importance of fretting is the preparation of the surface and the slots, for example. Get that absolutely spot on, and make sure that your frets are bent. The wire is bent to the radius, or slightly over bent to the radius of your neck, and then also to make sure that the frets are prepared. So the surface and the slots need to be prepared. So that means the slots have to be free of any rubbish, ideally cut through, as you saw there with a fret saw, slot saw. And so that both sides of the equation, the fret itself is as much prepared as it can be, and that the fingerboard that you're fretting it to is as prepared as it can be. Now in this case, the frets, apart from getting the right radius on them, bending them to the right radius, there isn't a lot of other preparation. If I was doing the undercut business like a bound neck, then there'd be more work to do, because you have to cut the overhang, remove the tang to create that overhang, to kind of step over the binding, and that takes a little work to do, but then you also have to make sure that where the tang comes away, you have to file under there to make sure that the underside of the crown is actually flat, because the tang tends to come away leaving a bit of stuff sticking up. Now this one, unless I'm imagining it, this one appears a little higher at the end, but I think it could be because the thing is, the edge is slightly rolled off here. But let's hit it again just to be on the safe side. Now obviously no fretting from this stage is perfect, because everything the board isn't perfectly microscopically smooth. Nothing's perfect. So what you get is slight tiny inconsistencies, but they're enough to make create some problems with playing. So every refret, almost every single refret, has to be leveled as well to make it work. So it's no defeat or shame that it does need that. It's pretty par for the course. So I expect it. I think I've probably got about, my figure is probably 1 in 30 or something goes in well enough straight from go that you don't have to do any subsequent leveling. But that's extremely rare and mostly a case of luck. I mean, you can help towards it by all that preparation and making sure that your board is radiused as uniformly as it needs to be and so on. But it's a crude, as you can see, it's a crude mechanical process hammering into an unpredictable organic material. So anyone who thinks that's going to produce the kind of results that can withstand, the types of variations on these on frets that cause buzz is tiny. It only takes 1/100th of a millimeter or something to create a choke or a buzz. So there's no way that's going to just drop in perfectly the first time round. So we expect it to need that extra work with the leveling. Somebody suggested I try cutting these back with actually it's a bit soft, this wood, I might change it for another block. Yeah, because we were talking about cutting these ends of frets, and somebody said they do it with a Dremel with a stone rather than a cutting disc, or because you can do it with a cutting disc, you can trim it with a cutting disc, and you can also sand it back with a little sanding drum, Dremel sanding drum. But they create a lot of, well, certainly the sanding drum creates quite a lot of heat. So best to avoid that, really. So you can hear that is not a very gentle process, and I think you have to keep that in mind. That if there are loose bits on your guitar, the fretting process like this can find them for you and can exacerbate them. So be wary of that. The press obviously doesn't create as much sort of a strike impact, but like I say, the press is good for bolt-on necks where you can feed the whole thing through, but not so good for a set neck like this. So I'm just going to now have a quick peek down here. It's a bit difficult to see because you've got the 0 fret in the way at this end, but looking side to side, zigzag, it looks pretty good. Obviously you can look the other way if you want to do it without the Z. I sound like a Russian military personnel. The 0 fret, not the Z fret. Special Operation Z fret. Get lost. Okay. Now, one of the things that, again, is a little bit hit and miss sometimes, is that if you are, when you're putting new frets in, if they happen to be a lot bigger than your original ones, which these aren't a lot bigger, they're practically the same, but if they happen to be a lot bigger than the originals, then what you can find is that they will come with slightly thicker tang, fret tang. And if that's the case, then you have to be cautious that the cumulative additional material involved in those slightly, very fractionally wider tangs can together cause a little bit of back bow on your neck, because it's basically you're prizing the neck a bit further apart, the holes or slots a bit further apart as you put this new material into it where there wasn't space originally for it. So if that's the case, and if you're not aware of it, you can get to the end and suddenly find you've got this back bow in your neck that you didn't expect and you didn't have before. And that can be taken care of with truss rod sometimes, but occasionally it's not. Sometimes it can be too much. If it's really severe, then you could be looking at a back bow that you can't tame. Not even with the strings pulling some relief, and not even with dialing the truss rod deliberately. So it's worth being very conscious if you're stepping up a large jump, significant jump in gauge in frets. Assume that you're going to be using, the frets will have thicker tangs, and you must assume that means that you're going to overfill the slots, if you like, and end up quite potentially with a bit of back bow. And the way to do that is to obviously either stick only to frets with the same size or same gauge, same tang width, or use a different tool or a different saw with the correct width, thickness, kerf. Is it kerf is the word? Kerf is the word, is the word. I think kerf is the word, that I'm feeling. Yeah, and so that will help prepare the material to receive the extra fret metal in the form of the tang. In this case they're very similar fret gauges, and tang thickness is from the outset, so I'm not worried about that. If I get it wrong, it'll tell me at the end, because I will have a back bowed neck that I can't do anything with, or can't tame the way I'd want to, in which case I would be compelled to live with it or pull the frets out and rethink. So I'm just going over these again. So it's quite a bit of squirt out there, which was saying you weren't quite seated the way you'd want to be, Captain. So it's good to ensure you get that last bit. And I caught a bit of paper, kind of rammed it under the fret end there, which we can do without as well. Okay. So the glue on here isn't 100% necessary, but in my experience it will help just hold the frets in nice and firmly. Now I'm just keeping an eye on, as I move up, making sure that when this block with the cork, the neck caul I believe it's called, just making sure that I know when it's coming towards the heel of the guitar, because if you're not careful, the edge of the neck caul is usually where the cork has worn most, and it tends to be that as you butt up into the heel, it has a light tendency to push the wood into the heel, and if you hit it with that like that, then you can put a dent in the heel, which you have to then try and steam out or fix in some way. So preferably we don't do that by keeping an eye on where the this neck caul is pointing, and taking care to rearrange things before we get to that spot. Notice I'm picking up the drip that's left over on the underside here as well, so it doesn't build up. So again, I'm just going to see where the things feel stable for tapping. It's pretty well seated from the outset, that one. So what I have to do with this guitar next, if I've got time today after I've done this, will be to make a template that's the same footprint as the new bridge, because I'm going to want to sink the bridge in about 2 millimeters. Well, I think so at the moment, but when the frets have set, so maybe I won't do that today, when the frets have set I'll be able to know, because I can put the headpiece on, pull some strings over it and hold the bridge there, and I'll be able to tell in real 3D. I may get away with not needing to sink any recess, but I'm prepared for a small recess in the bottom here, which would be routed and very tidy looking. Done it before, and the reason why is that those headless bridges, while they are really good, relatively good, I mean they're fantastic performance from relatively okay quality, but you've got to remember the fantastic performance part from a cheap bridge with relatively good construction, and not your German machined precision. However, that bridge, while it's actually a very practical and amazing quality bridge for for real world people to use, it's just slightly limited in its back and forwards intonation and up and down height range, which means you've got to get it exact. So to that end, I've been prepared to make a little recess in here and then use a series of brass shims underneath the footprint to bring it up. And the shims, of course, will have holes for the screws to go through, so they'll be kind of pinned to the wood, and they'll be invisible in that little 2 millimeter recess. But anyway, it may be that it sits on top the bare wood without any of that needing doing, but I will have prepared for it just in case, and that's the best thing to have done. Certainly not to assume that it was going to work out, because there's nothing worse than finding you've got it all you think worked out and then you're maybe a millimeter short on action up and down range, you know, and like I say, the bridge itself is slightly limited in those departments, but for what it is, it's a superb value, bargain Chinese device. And you know, on this video, providing I'm gonna have to, if I can't find my little adapter with the other SD card in it, I'm gonna have to buy another one. But anyway, when I shoot the next pieces of video for this, which will include putting the bridge on and showing the bridge, then I will kind of cover its pros and cons. I did write a review the other day on AliExpress about it, because I've used about 12 of them over time, and I've got 2 of them, so I've got 3 of them on guitars at home. One guitar, it was always a bit of a mad experiment, and I don't really play it because it's not to my liking, but it was worth doing as an experiment. But anyway, so I've got that one, and then I've got 2 guitars that I have it on and I play quite regularly, which play brilliantly. So my experience is, you know, I've played it on guitars for about 4 years. Has a very few limitations, but in some ways the limitations it has are less serious than the limitations that many of the much more expensive bridges have. So that's quite an interesting thing. So yes, it has limitations, but actually not at all show-stopping ones. Game-stopping? No. You know, deal-killing ones? No. Anyway, you know what I'm getting at. And one of the pluses about the major plus about it, I mean, first of all, I don't take the cheapness as I don't make that I don't consider that a completely significant plus. If something's good enough quality for what I need for the job at hand, then I would use it regardless of what it costs, because when you get the thing that's right to do the job, it's worth the money. But in the case of the expensive headless bridges, most of them are flawed in that they, for example, the one that originally came with this guitar, the Steinberger bridge, combined with the headpiece that they also chose for this guitar, the two things together mean you are forced to use double ball-ended strings. Now, as a user, that will cost you a lifetime of extra expense, penalising you for being a cool headless dude person. But not just that, the system this came with is the type where all the tuners stick out straight out the back. Now, that's okay, it's sort of logical, but it does force a certain design limitation or constraint. So, as you see, this guitar, like pretty much any other using those expensive quality Steinberger style or J custom bridges, they all require a sort of rebate cutting at the end of the guitar. So it sort of dictates the guitar shape considerably, and that's okay. It's par for the course. You might say, well, I want the benefits of headless, so I'll suck up the design constraints and go with the rebate, even if I don't like the idea of it. So that's a downside. You're forced into that design constraint. On the upside, the tuners on the expensiver, or the bridge that came with this, they are tunable by hand, partly because they stick out the back, which is a plus, the only plus of that aspect of the design, but also because they're better default quality, a little bit better default quality than the Chinese ones, which are similarly close together, but are really difficult to turn with the bare ands. So that's a plus for the Steinberger bridge. But we're still bearing in mind that we're talking 300 quid. And yes, okay, it's a tremolo bridge, but 300 quid. And you're forced to have double ball end strings. So what I like about the Chinese replacement one is that it's the only one of all the sort of designs, and of course it's the cheap one that people criticize for being Chinese pop metal, they call it. And the criticism is true, it's fair. It's made of soft, low-grade metal. Sort of high precision it is not. But despite that, it functions and it does its job, and it gives superb tuning stability. Now I and other people I've seen, get over the difficulty of tuning with these pegs by making a tuner knob, which I locate in a dock on the underside, and that's a little custom-made magnetic thing, which you can use when you need to tune the guitar, instead of trying to do it with your fingertips or reaching for the built-in crank, which is a fiddly little thing at the best of times. Although functional, I have to say, to be fair to the Chinese designers, or the Chinese copiers of the design, whatever is the correct term. But anyway, so it does work, but I make these little knobs that make the process a bit easier. But what I really like about them, the two absolute pluses for me, and one is that because the winding part, or the the tuner part is based on a drum at the bridge end. It's designed to wind on the cut end of the string. So that leaves you with the ball end, which is really needed in any headless combination or setup. The ball end is ideally structured for holding the weight of the strings or the force of the strings. So if you look at all the sort of popular Floyd Rose type tremolo systems, too many of them for my liking operate by relying on crushing grub screws at one end to hold a cut piece of wire against another piece of metal. And for me, that's a really lousy method, a crude and lousy method, half breaking a string in order to restrain it or keep it in place. I think that's dire. So having this so-called cheap and nasty Chinese drum arrangement is really good, because it uses the cut end of the string. Hooray! It does have no need down there for crushing grub screws, trying to hold strings in place by sheer brute force, metal against metal, and it leaves you with the wound end, which means you don't have to use crushing locking screws at the other end either. But the problem is that the unit they fitted, the headpiece they shipped this guitar with, required you. Now, did it have locking? No, it did. Sorry, it didn't have locking. That's right. At this end, it didn't have locking because it used the ball end at this end and then the ball end at the other end as well, which is why it made you buy the expensive ones. But so using the Chinese copy bridge, or the cheap Chinese bridge, I like to call it, you dispense with that need for double ball strings, and in fact the way I see it is you put the correct parts of the string to use in the correct way. So if you've got a ball end, it should be taking the weight of the strings like it does normally, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be doing that task in a headless guitar, which on the new Chinese device leaves you free to use the ball end for exactly that. And the second thing I most like about the cheap Chinese version, now I'm just checking where this comes down to, I think we're still good. It may be that we just put another little thin thing under here, slip a scratch plate, old scratch plate or two under there, just to lift it, or a bit of scratch plate material. So I'm just going to basically lift up this just to support, get it where I want it. Yeah, so the second thing is with the cheap Chinese bridge, the tuner things stick up at 45 degrees. Now you think, well, in one way, I think they originally probably thought that would help access. So they thought, I'm sure they thought, look, if we stick them up, then people can get their fingers under it slightly, and you won't have to cut rebates because you can put them anywhere else. But as it happens, they aren't that much easier. But because of the design, exactly that happens, is you can fit them on any guitar body. So instead of having to use one with a rebate, or take a guitar body, or design a guitar body with a rebate, this cheap Chinese bridge, headless bridge, means, because the things stick up, it means you can take a Strat, let's say a hardtail Strat or a Telecaster. You can take a hardtail Strat or a Tele, and you can chop off the headstock, leaving enough room to attach a headpiece, and then you can stick the bridge straight on top of the body as it stands. Or maybe in a Strat you might slightly fill up the hole. Either way, you can place it right on the front top part without having to cut any gaps at the back and change the look of the thing. So you can put it on a Strat, and actually the Strat still looks like a Strat in its shape because you haven't messed about with this. And of course, if you do that as well, it means you don't have to cut all the finish away and be left with a refinishing job because you've had to put a rebate in to fit the tuner sticking out the back. So I think the Chinese made a really good, that was a really smart move that they did with that neck. And actually, considering that both necks have different limitations, both bridges, sorry, I'm looking at a neck, both bridges have different limitations, and one is about £300 and the other is just about 30 now from China. It comes down to which are my least hated limitations versus price, and it actually comes down to me, to the fact that I prefer the pluses that the cheap Chinese one gives me over the so-called advantages, or the advantages of the expensive German designed one. And now the thing about that is, of course, if you haven't tested it for yourself, you can't know, and so it's a pretty unknown thing, and you'd be forgiven for thinking, can I have any faith that this 30 quid thing is going to give me tuning stability, for example? And actually, having played one and taken one and played one at gigs and things, you've got to be fairly confident in the performance of something to go and gig with it. I have to say that it is really, really dependable as far as tuning stability goes. Now the only area, and again this was such a particular thing that it wasn't a problem, the one place where the Chinese bridge can fall down is, it is because of the soft metal, it is the parts, or the little tiny grub screws, no, machine screws I should say, involved in its construction are susceptible to, for example, stripping of threads if you're not careful. But it's just a matter of being really careful. So for example, if you get one of the machine screws in, you're trying to lock down the saddle in its correct intonated place, for example, and you are not totally careful in locking it down with a little machine screw, you can strip the thread and that, and then suddenly you've got a saddle that won't lock in place, and suddenly the bridge is useless to you unless you can somehow fill the damaged thread and redo it, but that's not really practical. So your 30 quid's down the drain, and you're probably pissed off and thinking, well, that was a waste of time buying Chinese junk. So having discovered that fairly early on, what I found was that if you are very careful with it during installation, wow, it will, you'll get it set up, and once it's set up, it then performs brilliantly. So there are a couple of little issues like that, but providing the buyer or the owner is aware of those things, you can really anticipate them. And so partly my doing a review on AliExpress was about trying to share a bit of that experience so that people could have confidence to use it, take advantage of its superb price and ease of operation, relative ease of operation, and great tuning stability. There's nothing quite like the smile it puts on your face when you've got extraordinary tuning stability compared to your mates playing on the same stage as you, and your thing came from, the tuning stability partly comes from a 30 quid Chinese pot metal, inverted commas, bridge. The amount of smiles are inversely proportional to the cost. But of course, none of that matters if it doesn't perform, and it does. So typically, I remember gigging with this in Tavistock, and playing. One year played some summer gigs, and I remember playing for a first set of 45 minutes, and then a kind of mad second set of about an hour and a half after that for the second set. And I tuned the guitar only as a precaution at the halfway mark, so not in between songs. I just it stayed perfectly in tune, and so at the halfway mark I was able to just get my tuning knob up and give it a quick ying, and everything was good, and it stayed absolutely good for the second half of the second set, or second half of the gig. So of course that also depends on correct stretching of the strings. So I can tell you all of that, but if you don't stretch your strings thoroughly, then your bridge won't perform like that, or it won't appear to perform, because the slack in your strings will keep on putting the guitar out of tune for quite some time, regardless of how good or bad your bridge is. And that's just a standard sort of thing, really. It applies to any kind of bridge, regardless of cost. So yeah, in real life experience, I've had superb stability from it, and be able to play on a little kind of dinky little headless thing in a tight, cramped space on a pub stage. I have to say the only thing that I've since worked out about headless guitars like this, which is just a personal thing, is my wrists and bones prefer, I think, to be further out away from my body to play chords, and so I to be at the 12th fret, for example. I prefer to be 12th fret there than there, and this kind of guitar tends to bring the 12th fret in towards your body, whereas a double cut like a SG or something pushes the 12th, or all the frets, but the 12th fret that way. So as a personal preference, I'm not sure that the small size puts the frets exactly where I prefer them. That's all I would say about it, but that's no criticism of the bridge. It's just a constraint of making smaller. But if you didn't make them smaller, then just kept them the same size, then of course the frets would be. I mean, there's no reason you couldn't make a headless SG with the frets in all the same position that I like them currently. So it's just the fact that I think quite often people tend to use headless bridges in combination or in pursuit of what's often called travel guitars, or it gives you a chance to shorten them. And why would you shorten them? Oh yes, to make them portable and travelable and so on. So they often tend to be, and I kind of got into that. So my guitars, my Trekkies, were by definition sort of travel sized performance guitars. So I created that sort of situation for myself, where the frets playing up at the top end, I am closer to the body than it feels natural to me, and I have to admit that to myself. Although, I would love nothing more to take one of my headless, small sized guitars out and play it all the time. It's just a really nice thing to have something kind of compact that does everything you want, and in being smaller, my headless guitars, probably this one too, are actually a lot stronger overall. They've got less headstocks sitting miles away, less levering forces, or whatever we might call those forces, when something's further away at the end of away from the center of the thing. You know what I mean? The leverage is greater the further away the thing. You might crash into a post in the pub or whatever. You know what I mean? Anyway, so a little short stumpy thing is fantastic for pub gigging, providing it does creates all the tones and works you like. The playability is great. which I've never had, or don't have a problem with these days in making things. So I'm still tempted to make more of those travel guitars, because they actually sold more of those basic type than any others really, and I think partly because they are unusual and offer that portability, more portability, greater portability, but also because I think they're individual, unique or different. You know, that there isn't, anyone can buy a nice ash Strat, custom Strat, parts caster Strat, whatever. You know, there are loads of people making them and they all end up looking like Strats, but when you designed your own little guitar and then made multiple versions of them and learned the kind of highs and lows of the design and change things to fix things, then you've got something with a bit of pedigree to it, and it's tried and tested as well. So the funny thing about that is it only becomes tried and tested if you stick with it long enough. I think quite often when I started doing that design, what I noticed was it's great when you put it out there on something like Facebook and everyone gives you a view, but if you're not careful you can lose your own commitment to the thing you're doing, because of course everyone goes, oh, you know, I don't really like that cutaway you've done on that, and could it be more like this? And of course it could, and then you think about it, and actually I wasn't soliciting opinions, but people very kindly were giving opinions, and you feel an urge to kind of respond to them or develop what you're doing. You know, if somebody likes that, you think, oh, go in that direction. And then I realised that isn't as smart as it sounds, because there's nothing wrong with going in that direction, but if you do, you will lose the living with time that you need to develop something that works well. And I was conscious that I would be sort of quitting on the thing I started with, and it's that old thing about if you don't have faith in the thing you're doing, or show a commitment, not even faith, because faith implies you think you're right, but if you don't commit to the thing you've chosen, then it never stands a chance of growing a character or a sense of permanence. And you know, like all the original guitars, none of those things were familiar when they were first made. They were all bizarre, and everybody was probably saying to Leo Fender, you know, oh, Leo, why don't you make a square at the end of there, or why don't you splay out the strings either side, make it look more like that Gibson people do. And I'm sure there was tons of that, but he stuck with, he stuck with the design he did for one reason, primary reason, and that was the function of it, which is kind of what he was as an engineer. He was form follows function man, without a doubt. Whereas I would say that Gibson with Les Paul were a bit more function follows form. I mean, they were quite, I believe, I understand they were quite concerned about the look of they were judgmental about the non-classical skilled design look, instrument look of the Fender, mass-produced Fender instruments. And so they set about making a guitar that was, you know, had the sort of completely unnecessary but prettier female curves. And I'm not saying female curves are unnecessary, by the way, but you know what I mean. It was a kind of aesthetic consideration before, and you could tell that Leo Fender was not one to be pushed along that way. So anyway, so I kind of realized that as an experiment, I realized that in my life, a lot of things I'd made or done, I hadn't necessarily committed to as long as they deserved, you know, and I did get that strong feeling that if I didn't commit to them, at least something, I don't just mean marriages and relationships, but the things one makes, you know, commit to them first, stand by them, and then if they don't work in 10 years time, 5 years time, whatever, then choose a point to stop standing by them. But I really committed to standing by this, well, not this design, but the headless design that I made, the little trekkie shape, and as a result, it then grew on me, as things do when you spend time with them, or you just live with them, let them live with you. So it grew on me, and now it's a thing that has a sort of sense of itself. So yeah, I kind of learned a good thing from that. Anyway, so here we have the refretted neck throughout all of that chit chat. You saw how it occurred. Nothing supernatural, just a plodding process of tap, tap, clean, clean, tap, tap, clean, clean, check, tap. And then I'm just going to look down here in the light, and that, by and large, looks pretty good. There are maybe one or two that there's one or two that there's a lot of stick out, so the ragged edge is a bit off-putting. But once these have set and I do my cutting back, I want to cut back further, but I'll try and do it with the cutting disc. Once I've cut these back, and there's a bit of glue rolled onto there that I want to wipe off. By the time I've cut them back and ready to, or done the end bevel, then it's going to look really sort of precision-y, nicely done. Everything will look in a nice straight line. Of course, I can't. The thing I forgot this time is, well, I can get to this bit with the end beveling file. That's what I was working on, but I don't think it's a great access, and I probably would have been smarter. I've got some spare wire if necessary, but I probably would have been smarter to. Yeah, that's not a good look. I would have been smarter to cut these three to size. It is possible to do them from there. Typically what I do is I cut them individually and shape them individually. Let's see if let's just to make me feel a bit less edgy. Let's slice off, use a cutting disc to slice off the excess on there, just to check that it's as easy as that, because if I can do that, I can then end bevel it with a smaller file, but I don't want to be scraping away for hours trying to get a shot of the excess. But yeah, normally I think I fooled myself, because I think it sticks out so far. I didn't really think it was going to be a problem, but let's see how easy this will be. Well, easy enough to get it shorter. It heats up the glue a fair bit. Okay, well, it's I'm just going to be careful to touch those bits. So that's with the the Dremel cutting disc. So that comes, those bits come off all right with a bit of sticky glue underneath. Come along, get rid of those bits. Yeah, I mean, that's done the most of it. Wipe back that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's doable. We can live with the heat, I think. So come along. So what I'll do, that's hot, while I'm at it, just to be on the safe side, I'm just going to tap these to make sure that nothing about that sawing is going to cause it any disconnection or coming looseness. And then I'm just going to wipe off the excess glue under there with this, I think. So the rest of it can be reached by the end beveling file, that's the point. And then once I've cleaned these all back flush and wiped everything down, then it will be ready for spraying over. And the idea then will be to spray right over the fret ends so that only the fingerboard gets masked off, and then we cover up the fret ends with finish. Tidy it up that way. But for the time being, that's not bad. So the point being here is then we could get one of these stones. I've never really used a stone on metal. I'm not a metal worker typically, but let's see how this stone works, if at all. That's not what you want to do. Stay. I think stay there for starters. You don't want to lean on this because I'm just going to make it go up in the air again. Quite bouncy. Not a great device. So stones and fret ends, don't think so. Now what we might get a better result with for these top ones, I'm not going to touch the other ones, it's just these top three I want to get. Obviously I want to get back to a sort of workable, close to the wood finish. That's not bad actually. That's working all right. Let's just cover this over. And what I'll do is I'm going to put a bit of this tape, green tape, and a bit of Gorilla on top of it as a sort of super protector, like so. And that will be good to have in place anyway when it comes to doing the end beveling, because the file is going to come all the way up there, and tends to bang into the body. So that's got three ones out of reach of the end beveling file. That's got those trimmed back, and what we need now is effectively, I mean, this isn't the right one, but we could get a small block with some different grades of things that we can get there pretty easily from there, so that's okay. What I would do, and I'll probably do this off camera now in a minute, is I will cut off all of the excess on these. It's probably easier to do than doing this. This heats it up quite a bit. I think the cutter a bit less. So I'm going to, I'll do that off camera, because the rest now is just going to be leaving it overnight to set dry, and then I'll do the end beveling tomorrow. If I'd done it with super glue, we could have done the end beveling today, but I don't want to use super glue as it happens, so we aren't. We're going to do it just with wood glue. So I also have to do a bit of careful end sanding of this end platform here when the time's right. Okay, I think I'll stop now. That'll be it for the day, and I'll see you soon.